more desirable than less. If you got any comments on that, well, Senator Dees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is part of, again, the laundry, because I think there is not a lot of pork in this bill. It is very lean, and I think there are a lot of areas that I think many of us would like to see funded more. I realize you have a target, but it is challenging when you can't take from housing to supplant or fund additional stuff in ag. You can't take ag to fund housing. We're already short on broadband, and so that is part of the issue. And I know you worked hard to get at where you're at, but it is frustrating. I will reiterate, I don't think there's an actual rule that says, and I understand you want to be balanced, and otherwise finance is just going to literally come and slice and dice. So I appreciate that, but I'm just going to reiterate that it is frustrating that there's not a lot of stuff to move here. So I think we're just going to possibly continue on and again offer up the amendments to discuss where some of the concerns are. Thank you.
So Senator Aiken, we could move and take the money out of something else if you want. If you don't want to propose that, or are you thinking it's helpful to discuss it, but maybe at this time not move to pull it from somewhere else?
And Mr. Chair, I do not have any other source to pull it from at this point. And as Senator Giesecke said, there's not much to work with in this budget. So at this point, I would like to move it forward since we do have these very tight targets to work with. But I did want to bring it up for discussion.
Very good. Would you withdraw it at this point in time? Or?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'll withdraw the amendment.
Senator Eakin withdraws the 812 amendment. Thank you, Senator Eakin. Other amendments, members?
And Mr. Chair,
Senator Eakin.
I do also have the 810 amendment. This too does not fall within the target, but it's for
Senator Eakin moves the 810 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This would provide the funding necessary for the noxious weed program, $900,000 the first year and $900,000 the second, for noxious weeds prevention and preparedness. The local governments are responsible to manage the noxious weeds, but the Department of Agriculture assists in the enforcement, provides technical assistance to the local governments, which is critically important. And I think it's important to note that in fiscal years 18 and 19, the Department of Agriculture had $600,000 to grant for local weed work and received $1.3 million in grant requests. So it shows clearly that the needs outweigh the resources. Priority has been given to counties with the presence of Palmer amaranth. And without this funding, I'm concerned that we're going to end up with less weed management as a result. And the Department of Agriculture is assisting also through direct assistance. Local governments need and want technical assistance from the Department of Agriculture. The department has filled a lead role in Minnesota and the region in preventing and slowing the spread of Palmer amaranth into and within Minnesota, and the ability to find, contain, and eradicate new finds of Palmer amaranth, I think, is dependent on this funding. And that's the reason I bring the amendment forward, but again, it doesn't fall within the target. So at this point, I will withdraw that amendment.
Thank you, Senator Eakin. Other amendments? Senator Prince.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to offer the A7 amendment.
The A7 amendment is the offer. Pages are passing us out. Do you want to explain? Senator France.
Be happy to, Mr. Chair. Thank you. As the pages pass out the A7 amendment, this is to provide the funding for the Board of Animal Health and to the Department of Agriculture for the Emergency Incident Response Team. The gist of what's going on in committee today and what's going on with state members is that rural Minnesota and agriculture in particular is in trouble right now, and it's got risk. My home county, Nicollet, is the third largest pork producing county, and they are very concerned. African swine fever, outbreaks of diseases, and the vulnerability of that was just brought home by China last week as they suffered a devastating outbreak of African swine fever. This funding, $300,000 each of the years for the Department of Ag and $250,000 each year for the Board of Animal Health, allows us to be prepared. This committee heard testimony about why Minnesota had done so well in the past, why we had been prepared, and why it was important for us to be prepared. The current proposal is simply not adequate funding. For that reason, I'm asking members to keep in mind, we want to be ready, we want to continue to support agriculture, and as with so much of these budget appropriations, don't just ask what it costs, ask what it takes. If we, heaven forbid, have some trouble with African swine fever or some other outbreak, and we have failed to fully fund these items, Minnesotans are going to come looking for us and say, why wasn't this funding provided? And with that, with the understanding, Mr. Chair, that you intend to rule this amendment out of order, if it doesn't have a countervailing cut, I will withdraw the A7 amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator French. Senator French withdraws the A7 amendment. Senator Eakin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move the A17 amendment.
Senator Eakin moves the A17 amendment.
And Mr. Chair and members, this is an amendment that we can actually take a vote on. This amendment doesn't expend funds. It provides a definition for industrial hemp. And I did have an amendment that would have provided funding that we've lost from the industrial hemp program as well, which I think is critically important considering the tremendous opportunity that we have with industrial hemp at this time. As Commissioner Peterson had said, it's going to be that it is exploding across the country. There's intense competition for production of industrial hemp. And we have put ourselves in a good position with the pilot program that we put into place. And I think that we do need and should be continuing our funding for that. That especially now when we see that the farm economy is struggling. And I am also concerned, as the Commissioner said, about the message that we're sending. But one thing that we can do that does not cost money is to have a definition that corresponds with the federal definition of industrial hemp, to be in line with the new Farm Bill passed in 2018. And this is important. The amendment provides a definition that exactly aligns with the federal definition. And this will make it easier for us when we submit our plan to the federal government, a plan to show that we are in line with their law, which will make the approval process much easier. So for that reason, I again move the A7 and ask for your support.
Thank you, Senator Eakin. I think you kind of addressed it towards the end there. This would match or mirror federal definitions, and we just put things more on the same playing field. Is my understanding that correct?
And Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Yes. I might just, is Ms. Place here from the Department of Ag, or Commissioner Peterson? Would you have just comment on this definition change?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, yes, this definition aligns the definition in Minnesota statute with the federal definition of industrial hemp, and we feel that that will allow us to implement the industrial hemp program based on the new Farm Bill.
So, Ms. Place, I take that the department would welcome this as a friendly amendment. I mean, it'd be a helpful change.
Mr. Chair, yes, this was an initiative in our policy bill.
Okay. Senator Dietzig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Misplaced, and then I believe there were some discussions also, it's not in the language, but it's my understanding that you had discussions about possibly some stakeholders meeting along with the expedited rulemaking process. Could you explain that a bit?
Mr. Chair
Ms. Place?
and members of the committee, yes. So we've heard that there are some concerns about giving expedited rulemaking authority and the role of stakeholder input in that process. We feel that it's important to do expedited rulemaking because we want to make sure that we have rules in place before the 2020 growing season so that we can have our full program implemented at that time. We would welcome language that would ensure that we would engage stakeholders in that expedited rulemaking process.
So Ms. Place, would this language be in place of having to do expedited rulemaking, so you got a statutory change instead for you? Is that?
Mr. Chair, no, we still would need the expedited rulemaking language, but if the amendment includes it, we would welcome language that would address kind of the stakeholder input part of expedited rulemaking to ensure that the department includes that in our process.
Okay. So, I'm not sure I'm 100% clear on this place. So could we, I know there's some senators that have concerns with the expedited rulemaking allowance or process. So did I understand you? Could we avoid some of that by just adding language into the statute and make the change to the legislative body instead of going to rulemaking? Go ahead, Ms. Place.
Mr. Chair, no, we would need to implement rules for the statute for the Industrial Hemp Development Act. And so our intention is to submit a plan to the USDA. They need to approve that plan, and then we would start the rulemaking process. So that gives us a couple months to write rules before the 2020 growing season.
Okay, Mr. Knopf, do you have some additional insight here?
Well, Mr. Chairman, this provision, Senator Weber's bill, did go through state and local government, and it is restricted to what's required to conform with the farm bill from last year. So it's limited by that. I was also going to suggest, if you wanted to include something that stakeholders, you could on line 1.24 before the first insert, after consulting stakeholders, the commissioner may use. So I mean, if you want something as simple as that, that would work.
Very good. Senator Eakin, any thought on that, and then Senator Weber?
And, Mr. Chair, I would welcome that as a friendly amendment to the amendment.
Okay, let me come right back to that. Senator Weber, do you have something to contribute? And then...
Well, yes, Senator, Mr. Chairman. First, I have a question for the department. You're aware that this is an issue for some of the other senators, and they have been very vocal about it to me. Have you visited with them at this point in time regarding the parameters under which you wish to implement this?
Ms. Place?
Thank you, Mr. Weber.
Ms. Bobble?
Thank you. Yes, we met with both Senator Newman and Senator Kiffmeyer to talk about their concerns. It was clear from that discussion that the stakeholder engagement was a large concern. So we did talk about providing some additional language to work on those concerns, and so I think that they would welcome this change.
And Mr. Chairman?
Senator Weber?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then one other question. If this is to be anticipated for the 2020 growing season, is it possible from a timeline standpoint to have a reporting back to the legislature before that time as well? I mean, we will have a later start next year than we did this year, but that might afford some additional comfort to those individuals that have difficulty with this provision.
Ms. Ball?
Mr. Chair, Senator Weber, I just have to check into that. I think we'd be happy to talk to the committee about what the rulemaking would look like. Certainly, I think we are not trying to get anything past anybody. We just want to make sure that we have the regulatory program in place to implement the program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Weber. Senator Goggin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And a couple things I have is, number one, on the definition, can I get the reference in the federal, you know, where I can read it in the federal website or someplace that has the actual definition for cannabis or industrial hemp? I mean, I'd like to know where you got that, where you're getting the verbiage here in order to align with the federal. And then secondly, in regards to the rulemaking process, is there a possibility we can put a sunset date on that? Mr. Chair?
Ms. Ball?
Mr. Chair, Senator Goggin, so, yeah, so we got the definition from the 2018 Farm Bill that passed in December, so that's where the verbiage came from. It's not in Minnesota statute right now, it is a federal definition that we're trying to align with. As well as the rules technically go, they're only good for 2 years, so certainly we'll be revisiting them in 2 years as well. So I think just through the process already, there is a sunset date in place.
Ms. Ball, when you say the rules are only good for 2 years, why is that? Is that because under expedited rulemaking, they only last that long, or what provision has them good only for 2 years?
Mr. Chair, that's my, I could be incorrect, maybe legal counsel knows, that's my understanding of administrative rulemaking. So I could be incorrect, but that was what I was understanding. So we could get back to you on that, but my understanding is you have to revisit that.
So,
but if a sunset date would make folks feel more comfortable, we're happy with that as well.
okay. And you're okay with, Ms. Ball, with the oral amendment that Mr. Knopf read and Senator Regan said would be a friendly amendment, just to add clarification that stakeholders are part of that?
Mr. Chair, yes, absolutely.
Okay. With that, Senator Regan, any further comment? Otherwise, go to Mr. Knopf and maybe have him give us an oral amendment for the stakeholder and maybe a sunset, just to give everybody.
Sure, Mr. Chair, that sounds good.
Okay, Senator Knopf, I just about demoted you. Mr. Knopf, could you give us an oral amendment that would include both the stakeholder language you suggested and then maybe a sunset appropriate?
Sure, Mr. Chair, members, it would be on line 1.24, excuse me, too far. Before the first dot, insert after consulting stakeholders column, and then 1.27, after the period, insert this paragraph expires on June 30, 2020.
Okay. The chair would move. Senator Regan, would you incorporate that as a friendly amendment?
Mr. Chair, yes, I will incorporate that.
Okay, Senator Regan incorporates the oral amendment as a friendly amendment. Any further discussion to the your A17 amendment? Any further discussion of the A17 amendment as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion prevails. Thank you, Senator Regan. Any other amendments, members? I know we're running past time here, so some of us have other commitments to get to, so let's try to wrap it up, or else we'll have to come back after the state of the state. Sure. Senator Regan?
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll try to make this quick. I'd like to move the A14 amendment.
Senator Regan moves the A14 amendment. Senator Regan.
And this amendment, again, is to make a point about the importance of the Homework Starts at Home program. Homeless and highly mobile students are much more likely to be chronically absent, and chronic absenteeism jeopardizes their educational success. In the 2017-2018 school year, there were nearly 8,700 students experiencing homelessness in Minnesota. There's been a 56% growth in the number of children experiencing homelessness. And while the rate of homelessness is higher in the metropolitan area, it's growing faster in greater Minnesota. And there are also more greater Minnesota children and youth that are found that are not in formal shelters than in the Twin City metro area. So it is a very important issue, a real important concern. The pilot project, the Homework Starts at Home program, has been highly successful. 90% of the students in this program were stably housed and a significantly reduced chronic absenteeism. Stable housing provides a critical foundation for learning. It moves us to more stable families, and strong and stable families make for a stronger state. Housing should not be a barrier for any children's educational journey, and these children and parents have so much to give our state, but first they need help from us providing stability. And for that reason, I bring the amendment forward, but since it doesn't fall within the target, I will at this time withdraw the amendment.
Senator Eakin withdraws the amendment. Thank you, Senator Eakin, for bringing the issue forward. Other amendments, members? Senator Friends?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I would like to put forth the 815 amendment, Governor's Challenge Program. Following the same logic, I would like to put this in front of members, explain the amendment, and then would anticipate withdrawing it.
Senator Friends moves the 815 amendment. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Challenge Grant Program addresses a basic fundamental need that we've heard about all day today, which is the need to increase housing in the state of Minnesota. This is a successful program that addresses a demonstrated need. The 815 amendment would increase the funding by $7.25 million. The bill in front of us proposes to cut. The governor's proposal is to increase that funding. I think as a committee charged with overseeing housing, we should ask ourselves, are we trying to create greater housing in the state? If we are, then our fund targets and our budget should reflect that. Given our discussion earlier, Mr. Chair, about the need to meet the targets and ruling these amendments out of order, I would withdraw then the 815 amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Friends withdraws the 815 amendment. Further discussion, members? Any further discussion? Senator Weber?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a number of thoughts that I want to share, and I'll try to be brief. I think as we look at the Ag Bill, the amendments that were brought up, I think highlight some very valid points. And I think that at the end of the day, there are many of us that wish we had a different target than we do. But I think it's also important for us to remember that as we look at what everyone likes to talk about, the surplus. And yet, if we're realistic, we also recognize that the existing tails of the budget that will be in place, which are the sort of the parameters in which the current Senate bill is following, actually eats up that surplus in and of itself. You have the current tails out of the budget that will end on June 30th of this year, carries tails in excess of $2 billion. Even if we add not a single dollar to the budget, that's how much more money the state of Minnesota is going to spend as a result of the tails. And now, you can continue to spend like that if you decide you're going to continue to tax people like that. And we talk about the farm economy, and you're right, there are challenges on the farm right now. But do they need the 20-cent gallon gas tax increase? Do they need the other tax increases that will be required if the other budgets are adopted? And the reality of it is they don't. And so we have to be realistic about that. And at the end of the day, we all know how the budget process works, and I hope that there will be some monies to address the issues that have been talked about here, including broadband. I think as far as the ag language as it relates to pasture, that the MPCA is concerned about, the language does not release anyone from a manure management plan. It never has, it never will. I think, however, there's concerns that the agency has drawn pastures that are specifically excluded under current law into the feedlot rules and requirements. And I believe they have done so improperly. And unfortunately, too many times, we can't have a meaningful discussion about that until we in the legislature get a little obstinate about that. And, I hate to be obstinate, but I think I can do it at the end of the day. And as relates to housing, I I'm just simply going to state this. There are a lot of these programs, whether we're talking about homework starts at home or that, yes, there are a lot of good things that are out there. The thing that has been challenging for me, and we've had a lot of disappointment expressed today. Well, let me express some of my disappointment. 2 years ago, I started to talk about what I find to be frustrating, that as we talk about affordable workforce housing, we have gotten to a point where our affordable workforce housing really isn't affordable for our workforce. And I've complained about that for 2 years. And I've looked at the industry for 2 years. And has anybody brought forth any real meaningful solutions? The actuality of it is that we continue to ask for more money to do the same thing we have done that quite frankly has proven to be problematic. At the end of the day, how much money is enough? I know that the other body included $20-some million extra, and they were told that's not enough. The reality of it is, there's never going to be enough to spend all the money that some of you folks want to spend. And at the end of the day, we have to find ways to do more efficiently, with a lesser amount of money. It doesn't mean at times there can't be more money spent. It also means that we have to look at our manufactured housing and recognize that as the costs of some of these other units continue to rise, that offers to us some opportunities that quite frankly are available, and that quite frankly some of many in our workforce and many of our folks at the lower income stream need if they ever are to enjoy the benefits of home ownership. It's been said that our bill today will actually decrease home ownership. Well, it doesn't really have to. Yes, I know the department likes the tax-free bonds because they get a cut of the money and to help finance themselves. At the end of the day, there are other taxable bonds that can be issued to accomplish the same thing. And actually, we believe that within this budget, there's an opportunity to release enough funds to produce another 5 or 100 new units or 800 units in rehab that otherwise wouldn't have been available. Now, there are a lot of needs out there. There's no question about that. There are needs in the metro area. There are needs in the rural area. But folks, the time that is over, that we can just say, let's just do the same old thing and throw more money at it. Because we can't afford that. And Senator Dietrich made the comment about how, while we have the metro, we have the rural, yet we are all connected. When the housing market crashed in the metro area so substantially a few years ago, and the economy was tough, it was a vibrant rural economy that helped keep the state somewhat stabilized at that point in time. And even then, we encountered budget problems. And now we have difficulties on the farm. Fortunately, there are good job opportunities. There are a lot of job opportunities available in the metro area. And we have to rely on that economy to help bring about some stability to the state's economy. But this idea that we can always charge everybody more and not eventually negatively impact the economy is just plain and simply wrong. It has been said recently that on a national basis, some of the high tax states are the ones that are quite frankly doing the worst right now in this economy. Well, look at where we fall in some of the tax situations. Quite frankly, people, they're talking about us. And so at the end of the day, yeah, I hope we have a little additional money for some of these projects, because there are a lot of worthwhile projects here that we haven't been able to cover. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the work that you've done. I know that you've had a challenging task in front of you to come up with a budget that can respond to needs and yet deal with the budgetary restraints that are present. And hopefully, as time goes on and we make progress, we'll all be able to have a budget that at the end of the day we can support. But certainly at this point in time, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Thank you, Senator Weber. Any further discussion, members? Senator Dietrich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Weber, we do agree on a lot of stuff, and I do agree with you when you talk about the affordability of housing, because I have said for years, affordable to whom? Because in my neighborhood, there are rents that are what they consider affordable, or they're marketed as market rate, they are through the roof. And I don't know how your average person can afford them. So I think we agree that we do agree with there, and I think we do need to keep looking at how do we make this work. And I think this is a statewide crisis. It isn't just a metro issue, it is a statewide issue. There might be different solutions across the state, but I think it is a statewide issue, and I do think we need all hands on deck. And I'm glad that there's people in this room, and including industry and advocates, that we need to continue working on that, because I think the housing issue, where I might disagree with you, is I think that while our economy is clearly tightening in Minnesota and across the state, I think we are still doing better than a lot of other states. But part of the issue that is slowing down our economy is the shortage of workers, and part of that is the shortage of housing, or affordable housing. And so I think that is kind of a core. It impacts, if you don't have a place to go home and sleep, and you don't have a consistent place to go home and sleep, or you're always worried about when I'm going to be kicked out, how does your kid learn? And I don't need to share, repeat all this with you, because I think we all agree that, homework starts at home, and kids do better when they have a stable home. And so I think we need to keep working on this, and it is, I also agree with you, and I have told people that we don't have a surplus. If you look into the details, we don't have a surplus, and so, but I think there are priorities, and I think we need to literally, I know this was a tough budget, but I think we need to literally keep looking at, how do we help the average person who is looking for a job and looking for a place to live, and literally they can find a job, but there's no housing in that area, so then they can't take that job. So I think housing gets to the core, and I think we need to just keep working on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dietzich. Members, anybody else have any discussion? And I'm asking because I'll close with a few comments, but I don't want to cut anybody else off if there's others that want to comment. No further comments. So members, I know we're over time here, so I'll be brief, but certainly we heard some hand wringing, but members, I want to focus on some pretty positive highlights of this bill as well. Balancing the budget is always a tough thing to do. Senator Weber, I think, spoke well about the need to get outside the box and think about more affordable ways to actually provide affordable housing. We can't continue on this paradigm of new housing costs of $250,000, $300,000, $400,000 a unit. It's just simply affordable is not affordable the way we're going about this. So preserving manufactured homes and offering modular home opportunities in our manufactured home park, which is also part of this bill. We're bringing some new creative ways to help bring more affordable options to the workforce and to the people that want to have home ownership. And so think about those opportunities and those different ways of thinking about providing some home ownership in our communities and across the state. Because when the cost is hundreds of thousands of dollars a unit, the sky is not the limit, because we don't have a printing press. We aren't going to be able to keep affording those kind of costly projects. And so if we've got better, more efficient ways to do it, or at least be part of the solution, this budget, this proposal starts looking at those other ways. And hopefully it challenges those in the communities to also start looking at different ways than what we've always done in the past. Because what we've done in the past, we do know for certain, is not getting us where we need to go anytime fast. And so by the admission of the testimony we keep hearing over and over, one has to acknowledge that if we keep doing what we've done, we'll never get where we need to go. And so that is my comments on the housing part of this. Keep an open mind as we try to bring new ways, new opportunities, and help push the envelope to try to bring more housing units to the communities that are in such great need. And nothing seems to be done about driving down the cost of building these housing units. We need to get our arms around that. with broadband members, $30 million is not everything I wish we could have, but I think there's great support for this and additional dollars if they show up. The other thing I want to remind you is this is $30 million for next year. That leaves an opportunity for the following supplemental year to be a budget if we don't end up with anything more at the end of the year. That's $5 million away from what the governor's request for the first year would be. And so I think it's a good starting point. We can build off of there, and we can continue to try to support this in the next year's budget if there happens to be enough funds to fund a second year. And so this is a strong commitment under the budgets we have to make rural broadband well-funded for the next year, and certainly I will continue to try to advocate for ways and try to find, we're working with other senators and legislators to make sure this priority can continue to be funded, because we know the great many good things it's done in rural communities, and it really is modern day electricity for our rural communities and job development. Looking at the ag side of things, folks, there's a lot of negative outlooks in agriculture, mental health, which is being carried in another bill, and so don't say this too loud, but the finance chair has actually given us just a little bit of a target above zero because she's carrying it in Senate File 1, some additional funds for the mental health, as well as some other money for bridges potentially. And so that is actually going to give our zero target a slight increase for those important issues. And so I want to highlight that because we have not forgotten about the mental health. We know how important it is. Farmers are struggling out there, and we want to be a resource, and we want to be there to help them. We've got some great innovative ways to help our dairy farmers here. We've heard from them. It's probably the one sector that's struggling even harder and worse than most of the others. But folks, if we can help them innovate with technology and modernize their facilities with robots, what a great thing if Minnesota could be at the forefront of modernization and technology, and our small farmers are using robots to cut down on their labor costs and their labor commitment to their farm, and we can be there in the forefront to lead the way on that type of technology. Also helping them with assistance one time to get into the dairy margin program so they have a safety net to make it through the next year. And so that $5 million is something we need to brag about. We need to push hard for our dairy farmers to keep that sector of our ag economy strong and keep them here and try to stop the hemorrhaging and help them have a future to look forward to with a reason by efficiency that they can compete and they can survive long term. And we've also got funding for the biofuels. We put $2.5 million in. We've tried to put it in the base so we give some certainty to the companies that are looking at coming here, that are here, ready to expand and want some certainty. Folks, this is the next generation. This is the new ethanol opportunities. The reason we have the Agri Fund primarily in the first place. And so we've tried to make a good commitment to them. We've also had an interesting project with the soybean growers and the crushing up in northwest Minnesota, new opportunities for value-added testing and markets, and we would have $5 million to help advance that project and help our farmers, crop farmers, those that raise soybeans, and those that raise soybeans typically raise corn and other crops as well. And if we can help them develop more market value-added opportunities, coupled with a slight increase to AURI, who helps develop the products in the markets, we need to be looking at the positive things in this bill. And even with a tight budget with a zero target, we've been able to, I think, come up with some real helpful items for our farmers and our ag economy in rural Minnesota. And we need to be bold about that and not be bashful and pursue those projects, because we can actually be a strong partner and a strong force to help assist rural Minnesota and farmers get through these tough economic times. And so with that, members, I would urge your support of this budget as we go forward. Certainly, I'm open to finding any ways to improve it. Thank you, Senator Eakin, for bringing forward one amendment that changed the industrial amendment. We can make those positive changes. Let's work together and get it done. So with that, no further discussion. The chair will take the the chair will vote on the final. So to center file 2226 as amended, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion prevails. With that, members, so that concludes our business for today. And